Hey guys, this is John, and welcome to another Climbing the Rating Ladder video. I'm playing Clamp 7377. Let's open with E4. This is a 10 plus 0, so 10 minutes, no increment game. It's unrated, so yeah, this was just one of the first seeks that I saw. Not putting my rating at risk in this one. But okay, we get Knight C6 on move 2. I usually play Ruy Lopez or Italian game. I have half a mind to do something different. Let's play a 4 knights, or an invitation to a 4 knights. I'll play Knight C3. And I know there's a trendy variation, Knight F6 and then A3, that players are playing recently. Black plays Bishop C5, but I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a bit of a mistake because White can play Knight takes E5 and get this center fork trick. So we're going to win the piece back. That's a standard operation. Black could have played Bishop takes F2, by the way, after Knight takes E5, but I think that works out even worse for Black. So yeah, Bishop D6, let's take. And it's nothing major, but I think this should be somewhat comfortable for White. Bishop C4. Just thinking on Knight F6, how I want to proceed there. Maybe I just castle. Yeah, I think Bishop C4 is okay. It sets up ideas against F7 and also maybe with Queen D5. Let's play it. I'm not going to fear Bishop takes C3, because even though that does wreck my queenside pawns, I'm going to have the two bishops and plenty of open lines to work with. So I think on the balance, I would like that. Yeah, so Knight F6, that makes sense. F4 strikes me as premature, so let's just castle short. I'll try not to use too much time here in the opening. This is the first video I've recorded since wrapping the Lone Wolf season, so it's kind of back to your regular scheduled programming, guys, for the foreseeable future. But I've learned from the Lone Wolf games that as much as I can continue pushing the pace and talk through my moves after I play them, the better. It's just a much better situation than talking too much before playing my moves. So castles, yeah, Bishop G5 probably will be met by H6, and then if Bishop H4, maybe Black can justify G5. Looks a bit risky. I think Rook E1 would be a no-nonsense good move. Yeah, let's play Rook E1 just to defend this pawn. And I am inviting Bishop takes E5 still, or Bishop takes C3 rather. Sometimes I say the origination square rather than the destination square. So yeah, I'm inviting Black to take, but I really do think I would like that with the two bishops. That's not a trade-off you can make lightly, though, offering to compromise your pawns. I have to be able to articulate why I'm allowing that. And in fact, now I could force it with F4 if I want to. So Black is preventing Bishop G5 with their last move. So I could force things. F4, Bishop takes C3, pawn takes C3. There's no center fork trick Black can run on me. Probably Black will play D6 there. I do still like that, but I could also perhaps try to work up to this. I'm not obligated to play this way. Maybe even moving the knight away somewhere would be interesting. A move like Knight B5. Trying to prepare F4, although when you bring your knight to the 5th rank like that, you are inviting your opponent to push pawns. Bishop D2 also, although that gives Bishop D4 in some cases. So I'm just going to look at F4 again. I think Black pretty much has to play D6 at that point. I could try to continue pushing the pace with E5 or maybe Bishop A3, but on Rook E8, E5, some sort of trade. Not totally sold. Not totally sold. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna go Knight B5. This move does look a little odd, but I'm trying to repurpose my knight. Let's say Knight D4 against A6. Still with F4 in mind in some cases, but I don't think I have to allow the doubling now. I think there's a decent chance I will still get Black's bishop without necessarily allowing a doubling. And I probably should have mentioned if D5 here, I can take on D5 and open up a discovery on the bishop. There are some possible Greek gift ideas I have to consider, like Bishop takes H2 in that circumstance, followed by Knight G4. But I think they're going to fail because when, well, that might be interesting. I think they should fail, but when Black's queen lands on, knight comes to G4 and Black's queen lands on H4, I have a couple things. Knight f3, bishop f4. Although there is queen takes f2. Maybe that's a line. We'll have to see how that works out. But yeah, so pivoting the knight to d4. And on the next move, depends what black does, of course, but I may play f4 straight away. I may play a preparatory move like h3. I think that would be reasonable. Oh, notice black can't play knight takes e4 and try to do the center fork trick to me because their bishop will hang on e5. So black plays d6. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I think h3 is wise here. I think that conforms to my setup rather nicely as well. One of those moves that always looks useful. Let's go for it. Screen capture looking good. Hope you all are doing well. Getting back into it here on the channel. I really enjoyed those Lone Wolf games, though. So if you happen to miss that series altogether, welcome back from whatever vacation you took for about 3 months. But no, seriously, if you maybe glossed over those videos because they are quite long, I would urge you to give them a look. I think they are quite instructional and they turned out really well. So you can break it up. You can look at them at your leisure, at the pace that you're comfortable with. So this move opens up knight c6. So I'm thinking knight c6 followed by knight takes e5. Yeah, I'll have the bishop pair. Maybe there's some way I could get more out of this, but I think that's probably about the maximum I'm going to achieve. So knight c6 with tempo. Yeah, queen e8 makes sense. Let's take. That also defends the bishop. Okay, and black takes with the queen. I'm a little surprised by that. I thought they would take with the pawn. My bishop is under attack. Where do I want to put it? Bishop d3 is obvious. But then bishop b7. And if f4, queen d4. I'm not so concerned about knight takes e4. So maybe bishop b3. But then bishop e6. There's bishop f1 as well. Kind of like bishop b3, though. I'll try to keep my bishop a little more active, keep my queen positioned on the d file, and continue minding my time. So on the balance, I don't feel like I gained a whole lot out of this opening. I think this is reasonable, but probably nothing too special. And now on f4, maybe queen e7 is what black will do, along with queen c5. So I might want to build things a little bit, play f3. Technically, black's still not threatening to take the pawn yet, though it must be said. So maybe I could get away with c3. And if knight takes e4, f3, queen c5, bishop e3, I think backfires on black. Okay, let's play c3. Blocks queen takes b2 in some cases. Daring black to take, but I'm pretty sure taking is bad because of f3 in either case. And black sniffs that out, plays rook e8. Yeah, and now I might just need to play the f3 move that I have in mind. And then if d5, do I go f4 followed by e5? Maybe I switch it up. Yeah, I think I might. Let's play it. So sometimes you can get away with this. And by that, I mean leaving a piece undeveloped, like this bishop on c1. Because I do feel the bishops from a distance even exert some nice influence on the position. So I'm not super concerned about that underdevelopment. Now, knight h5, getting creative, I feel that shouldn't be great. Because I'm not too worried about the knight coming into f4. Let's play bishop e3. And notice how this chain of pawns, by the way, pawns on e4, f3, g2, help block this enemy bishop on b7. It's often good against a fianchettoed bishop to establish 2 or more pawns on that long diagonal on the same color as that bishop. So it's hindered. Biting on granite, as they say. Okay, and now another flank move, a5. My first instinct is just to play a3 against this move. Maybe a4 also makes some sense. a4 or a3, close call. Probably not worth burning a ton of time. Let's go with a4. Not sure a4 for black is that big of a concern, but a4, my bishop moves, and then a3, arguably black is getting at my queenside structure. So I think playing an a-pawn move makes sense. I don't have to commit to bishop c2 yet. So I sense that black is casting around, sort of looking for some sort of hook they can get their claws into in my position. Not a hook in a strict chess sense, but just some type of plan in general. So not looking for 2 points of contact, which is often how I refer to as a hook, or what I refer to as a hook. But they're casting around looking for some way to try to cause me problems. But I think they also sense that it's difficult. Because even this hesitation by black with this move, knight h5, and also a5, it shuts down a lot of their ambitions if they wanted to break in the center or challenge my pawn on e4 in some way. That's going to be difficult now for black. I'm creating a mini issue for black. I am threatening a takes b5, queen takes b5, bishop a4. And now c5, doesn't that blunder a takes b5? I think it does. I think black forgot about that. So let's take. And if c4, I can just take the pawn. And now a4, but the wheels appear to be going off completely now. Rook takes a4. Yeah, rook takes a4 or bishop takes a4. Doesn't seem to make much of a difference. Take with the rook. And now I'm just going to be absolutely cognizant of my time. Black's going to throw the kitchen sink at me. Rook g6. Probably not a bad attempt. Probably not a bad attempt. Might be f4 in some cases. But for now, I want to work to diffuse any play that black has in mind. Maybe queen d2, rook g6, queen f2, something like that. And if the knight comes in, knight f4, take it. Yeah, let's go queen d2. And then queen f2, marshaling my forces around my king. This still looks interesting, though. Bishop c8, maybe, trying to play bishop takes h3. I could perhaps go g4. That still looks pretty solid, but there will be some avenues for counterplay for black. Maybe knight f4 at that point. So I still got some work to do. But up 2 pawns looks very, very good. Rook g3. Ooh, this coordination looks sketchy for black. Maybe bishop d1. Prepare some sort of ambush. I don't think black is threatening much at the moment. Yeah, let's go bishop d1. So sort of loading up. So if f4, I'm not sure f4 is an immediate threat because queen takes e4 and black will be on g2. But I might have as an immediate threat f4, queen takes e4, and then bishop f3. Okay, so queen f6, and I might still play this f4 move. Bishop takes e4, bishop takes h5, rook takes g2. We could get multiple pieces for the queen. But there's queen h4 at the end. Clever, clever. So queen f6. E5 maybe? Does e5 make sense? I'm hesitant to open that diagonal. Let's go. I know this looks horribly passive, but let's go bishop back to c1. I'm sort of retreating to hopefully further my cause here, guys. Safeguarding my pieces. Am I tempting bishop takes bishop c8 though? Okay, queen h4, but I think now is the time for this f4 move. Yeah, let's go f4. And I'm trying to break up this hold that black has on the position on the dark squares with knight on h5, queen on h4, rook on g3. Black plays f5, but bishop takes h5 is possible. Let's do it. Bishop takes e4 is coming. Still going to have to dodge a few tricks. So that does create some pressure. Probably rook takes e4 is cleanest here. Let's play that. Rook takes e4, and then what? Black's actually kind of stuck in this position, funnily enough. Maybe bishop e3? Yeah, let's go bishop e3, because queen takes h5, I take the rook. And, whoa, that's too much. I'll take your queen. I think they're only counting on queen takes rook and then queen takes h5. But yeah, I was thinking about moving the b pawn at some point. That got a little dicey towards the end, especially with the time situation. I am curious if Black had something. Let me turn off the analysis for a second, because it's always good when you're looking at games right after you play them to try to formulate your own thoughts and have some of your own opinions before going into the analysis. I try to stress this in almost every serious game, especially climbing the rating ladder, but so crucial to think on your own, even in the analysis phase before you look at the engine. So yeah, I do wonder right here when I played bishop c1, because it does look like I'm playing a little passively at this point. And in some ways I am. I'm retreating, but I'm hoping to safeguard my position a little bit. I'm hoping to work up to f4. I was actually fairly concerned about bishop c8 at this point. And I do wonder if I've overplayed my hand if Black had played bishop c8, because that sets up the threat of bishop takes h3. Maybe I could run away with king f1, but boy, it looks a little sketchy with the time situation, and all of Black's pieces are coming in. I was considering playing f4 on the prior move, but I didn't like bishop takes e4, and then if bishop takes h5, I saw that I would get 2 bishops and a rook for the queen. But you know what? You always got to go to the end of the variation. And I spotted that Black has queen h4 here, hitting the undefended rook and the undefended bishop on h5. And that looked bad. Maybe there's something I can do with my b pawn here, but actually, could I push the b pawn? As if queen takes rook b7, how does Black actually stop that pawn? I'm covering all these checking squares. But you know what? Black could take the light square bishop instead. And if b7, there's queen d5 check with a fork. So yeah, that looked too sketchy to, had Black played queen f6, execute in the moment. Or sorry, had Black played bishop c8 right here. That looked a little sketchy to play. So I'll be curious how I could have improved there. Certainly when Black played c5 and I took on b5, Black went a4, I went up 2 pawns, things were looking great. But I actually wonder if this was Black's plan all along. Maybe not with c5 so much, although probably what Black's doing, I think I'm ascertaining here, Black was trying to force my bishop off of this a2 g8 diagonal. This didn't occur to me in the game until after I've said it now here in the analysis, but that must have been what Black was doing. Again, I don't know if Black intended to lose the pawn on b5, because they do block their queen from defending that pawn, but I think with c5, Black is, now that I think about it, for sure going for c4. And then after I took the pawn, Black probably saw, well, not going to get c4 in anytime soon, now that that pawn on b5 is gone, supporting it. So let's go a4. What's a couple pawns amongst friends? And that winds up in the bishop getting deflected, and rook e6 is actually a pretty good move. And I feel like White should be stone cold winning here, but it's not all that simple. So we'll take a look. So back to the opening for a second, again, before we get into the analysis, this 4 knights defense, or actually the 3 knights defense, a lot of times Black does just play knight f6 and make it a proper 4 knights, whereupon White can play bishop b5. That's the old-fashioned way of playing this. White can go d4 and go into a 4-knight Scotch. That's also very popular, has a lot of theory. Nowadays, they're playing modern stuff like a3, which every time I see this type of move, I just crack up because I'm thinking, is this the best we've got with modern opening theory? But a3 is a useful waiting move. It prevents bishop b4. And I believe it actually tries to tempt the move that black played in the game without a pair of the knights being developed, bishop c5, which would allow this center fork trick again, when white's, I think, a little bit better. So it's just funny, a3. There's also g3. I think Daniel Naroditsky plays this. This is the Gleck system. So going for a fianchetto of the light square bishop. I played that a couple times, but I don't have too much experience. I honestly just wanted to try something different that some of the viewers out there may play. So, and from black's point of view, you can play knight f6, like I was saying. I don't think that's the only decent move. I think bishop b4 here is actually okay too. Maybe a few other moves, but knight f6 certainly is the most classical way to handle this. So, yeah, I was pretty okay with my play in the opening. I don't know about this knight b5 thing. That's debatable. Maybe I was getting a bit fancy with this move, but I was thinking, well, I want to remove this bishop on e5 at some point. And I could play f4 right away, but if black takes and then plays d6, at this stage, I might have to play fairly energetically to keep any edge, if it exists at all. d6 is pretty important to forestall e5, or just be able to take and open lines if white plays e5, and open lines maybe not even in white's favor at this point. So we'll see what the engine says about f4. Otherwise, if I don't have f4 or f4 pretty quickly, I think black's position is more or less fine, because the bishop could be a target on e5, but it's also working in two directions. And for that matter, I do wonder, when I pivoted the knight to d4, could black actually play d5, pawn takes d5, and bishop takes h2, this Greek gift, with the idea of king takes h2 and now knight g4 check? Because initially I saw that if king g1, queen h4, there's multiple ways I can defend against queen h2, such as knight f3 or bishop f4. But because I played rook e1, and this is something you have to watch out for in a Greek gift situation, I have to worry about queen takes f2. Black has queen takes pawn on f2, which in this case with bishop f4 would be a disaster, because black can go take my bishop after that, and black's winning. So if that's the case, d5, e takes d5, bishop takes h2. Okay, a line you always have to look at is king takes h2, knight g4, and then the bold king g3. This might be the way to go. I know this move looks wild, but sometimes it's the best way to refute this Greek gift, because this move prevents queen h4 entirely, and if queen d6, then bishop f4 is coming in just in time. Even then, though, there might be some complications with queen g6. So I don't know. I'll get the engine's opinion on that. In hindsight, I do think knight b5 might be a mistake. I might have overplayed my hand with that move. I was also thinking of c6 against knight b5. I can anchor the knight on d6. Although even this might be of dubious nature. Perhaps black can just play queen c7 here and break up this knight situation really quickly. Knight takes c8. Probably not bishop takes h2, because that bishop might wind up just getting trapped, and I don't know if black wants to sacrifice like this. This is tempting, but often just not a great idea. But some of these lines look a little sketchy, and I think knight b5 was too extravagant for me. So in hindsight, probably something like, yeah, maybe settling for bishop d2 or the direct f4 even would have been better. So yeah, we'll see. Maybe there's a way to get a bigger advantage against this bishop d6 thing. I know sometimes they play f4 here. I briefly paused before taking the knight on e5, but I didn't have the guts to do this, especially when I was playing without opening knowledge. This looks... You get this huge pawn center, but I'm not sure it's worth a piece for a pawn. So probably not worth it. There's some similarities to the Halloween Gambit, which I think is in this Four Knights defense. Yeah, I haven't played this in ages. There's actually a Lee Chess Arena from years and years ago where I played a Halloween Gambit themed arena on Halloween, I think. But it reminds me of this Halloween Gambit where white tries to sack a pawn for a piece, and then get momentum in the center with their central pawns. Okay, so let's click into the game review, look at the analysis. Time management probably could have been better for me. And I think for Black, they were playing a little fast and pretty locked in with the whole C5, C4 operation. Black was really risking everything. But then again, it could have worked potentially with the rook E6, rook G6 lift. So because this is climbing the rating ladder and I'm trying to offer some sort of actionable advice, even if it's just things to watch out for in your own games, I do think for Clamp, probably would have been better to clarify what part of the board they were playing on prior to playing knight h5 in particular, but also a5. So those two moves back to back, knight h5 and then a5. I don't think you're going to have long-term success in chess kind of playing scattershot like that, even if you're not blundering. So not the worst plan in the world. And actually, I see here in the middle game, Black was even better. Yeah, after I did this whole plan to get the two bishops. But I think when we get there, knight h5, a5, that's probably where Black's position starts to go downhill. So what were the stats on this one? I think I had a 93.4 versus 83.6 for my opponent. I'm going to click into just the pure analysis board because all the excessive colors and prompts on every move distract me sometimes, oftentimes. So, okay, so we have this 3 knights opening. Let's just see in the opening book what Black usually does here. I think knight f6 is overwhelmingly the most played move. Yeah, g6 gets played. Let me shrink my camera. We're going to small John here, just so you can see. So yeah, g6 sometimes, bishop c5. But the bishop c5 move scores appreciably worse for Black than knight f6 especially. So, and that's what I always thought, that I was taught that bishop c5, allowing this center fork trick is usually not the best idea. But the extent of that advantage has yet to be determined. We'll see when we get there. So yeah, knight f6, and then bishop b4, or like I said, this modern a3 move, d4, very popular, g3 as well. But not bishop c4. This is well known because Black can do the same thing that I did to Black in this game. So Black can play knight takes e4, and if knight takes e4, d5, fork the two pieces. Black's going to win their piece back. Yeah, there's lots of games played from here, but Black is at least equal and oftentimes gets an advantage out of this. Whether White plays like this, whereupon Black has a good pawn in the center and the two bishops, or if White goes, you see games bishop b5, d takes e4, knight takes e4 sometimes. I've had this position myself with the Black pieces. You can play either queen d5 here to attack the knight and defend c6, or the trickier queen g5, which hits a couple pieces along the 5th rank and also eyes the pawn on g2. So you guys can check this out if you're curious, but definitely White is no better, and I think White has to be very careful if they go for this. One other thing, so when this this sacrifice hits the board, this pseudo-sacrifice, center fork trick, hits the board, oftentimes the player who's going to get forked will think to play bishop takes f7, or with colors reversed, bishop takes f2. Usually this is even worse, this version of it, because although you do expose the enemy king, you allow the opponent to keep both center pawns intact, and those center pawns can advance astonishingly quickly and push around the opponent's knights. And even though White might get in a superficial check, they're going to have to pay the piper real soon with all the momentum that Black suddenly has. So I've seen games like d3 trying to forestall e4, but then h6. Notice how the knights are stumbling over each other. Knight h3, yeah, bishop d6, or I think I've even played bishop g4 in a position like this. Black's king situation, yeah, it looks temporarily ugly, but White has been forced back. White's coordination is pretty awful with that knight on h3, the worst piece on the board for White. Black has the two bishops, a beautiful center. The engines always love this for the side with the bishops and the center pawns. So just a heads up on that, because we see a similar option for Black in the game. So bishop c5, I play knight takes e5. Now, I'll point this out in a second. I guess I'll save this comment I had in mind. But yeah, if bishop takes f2, king takes f2, knight takes e5, d4, It's very similar, if not even arguably worse for black, because they don't even have knight g4 here due to queen takes g4. So yeah, knight g6. And I might have to spend a few moves consolidating, trying to protect my king. Maybe even a castling by hand type thing. Yeah, like rook f1 and king g1. But very nice for white overall that these two center pawns, which are on the traditionally best center squares, d4 and e4, it's very nice that both of those pawns are intact. So, okay, so what was I going to mention here? So let's say I had played bishop c4 instead after bishop c5. So if I had played bishop c4 and then black plays knight f6, we get a symmetric position with most of the minor pieces out. Super popular position in Scholastic games. If you ever go to a Scholastic chess tournament and you walk around and look at the boards, I remember this from my days of Scholastic tournaments. I used to see this position all the time. People would always play stuff like d3, d6. Usually the side who gets the pin against the knights on f6 or f3 has an advantage because of stuff like this, knight d5. But I just wanted to point this out because if white tries to run the center fork trick now, knight takes e5, guess what? That's a huge blunder. And it's because knight takes e5, d4, runs into knight takes c4. And even though white can play d takes c5, black has won 2 minor pieces for 1 minor piece in that transaction. Black has 3 remaining minor pieces to white's 2 only. That's a common way the center fork trick can go wrong, is if you try to run it, but you actually hang a bishop that's on the 4th rank or the 5th rank after that when they take with their knight. So you can never just blindly follow rules, traps, ideas, themes in chess. You always, always, always have to tailor it and consider it in the position in front of you. Even if the position in front of you looks nearly identical, if not actually identical in your head, it's worth spending an extra couple of seconds, even in those moments, to verify whether the mechanics and the concrete operation actually works. Just fools rush in. Don't do that stuff blindly in chess. You're going to get hurt. So, yeah, that's why had this happened, these knight takes e4, knight takes e5 ideas are likely not going to land because they're going to be hitting the enemy bishop when they take back with the knight. So, okay, all that preamble out of the way, I played knight takes e5, which I think is the most principled move. So knight takes e5, d4, bishop d6. Okay, good. D takes e5 is the only decent move here. And bishop c4. So interesting. So already that move isn't the best. Bishop d3 or bishop e3 are better. So the engine says maybe defend this pawn on e4. Let's just see how this might turn out. Knight f6, castles, bishop g5. Okay, and then if something like d6, now f4. That does make some sense because even though my bishop was more active on c4, it might have been nicer to have it on d3 for that defense of the e-pawn. So if bishop takes c3, b takes c3, let's say h6, here I can play bishop h4, and there's never any fear of knight takes e4 operation. Or in similar positions in the game, maybe without f4, I was a little worried about g5, bishop g3, knight takes e4 in this situation. But even if my pawn are back on f2, that would not be possible for black with the bishop helping out to defend the e-pawn. I feel like this bishop d3 thing versus bishop c4 is something I've maybe analyzed before. Maybe I've even had a climbing the rating ladder game in the past where I've made a similar revelation. But yeah, bishop c4 forfeits a lot of my advantage here. It's not a huge advantage. It's like a half pawn to a quarter pawn, somewhere in that range. But it's interesting that this active-looking principled move actually forfeits a lot of that advantage. And the engine wants to defend the pawn on e4. In my experience, usually a bishop like that isn't the best because you don't want your bishop acting as a tall pawn, typically. But I think when we're connecting it to f4 in a lot of lines, we like that defense of the e4 pawn when the knight can be eliminated. Okay. There's other moves too, it looks like. f4 directly even. Seemed a bit premature to me, but the computer thinks white retain some edge here. Okay, I can see that. Knight f6, e5. Try to open the position before black gets a chance to castle. And maybe even, yeah, try to play super actively and exploit this situation before black gets fully coordinated. Although this still looks pretty sharp. Okay, so bishop c4, knight f6, that's good. Castles, black castles. So had black been greedy here and played bishop takes c3, b takes c3, knight takes e4, they're going to get punished. And they can get punished in multiple ways. Rook e1 is a nice way to play, pinning the knight to the king. And if bishop d5, I can just go ahead and take that pawn on d5. f5 supports the knight, but boy, it strands the king in the center. Also walks into f3 at minimum. And white's going to pick up the piece. So that's probably what I would have done, rook e1. I think there's also queen d5, hitting the knight and also threatening queen takes f7. You do got to watch knight d6 sometimes in this position. Although I think rook e1, king f8, and then either bishop g5 or, yeah, bishop a3. Yeah, that looks really good too, doesn't it? Black is all pinned up here. Queen f6 is the only move not to lose. Reinforce these points. And then, yeah, rook e3, try to build up. Black's up a pawn, but they can barely move a muscle here. c6, queen takes d6, b6 drops the knight, the rook on a8. Yeah, this is looking over. Rook f3, rook e1. So that would be a very bad idea for black to get greedy and try to win that pawn, especially before castling. So black castles. Yeah, and I played rook e1. I was already starting to realize that this is not so simple. Not so simple to keep an advantage. In fact, the engine wants me to admit my mistake with bishop c4 and play the bishop back to d3. That's funny. Bishop g5 came to mind, but I just wasn't sure after h6 what I was going to do, because bishop h4, I thought g5. And this is the scenario I was referring to, where if bishop g3, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, knight takes e4. I looked at this in my head, and I briefly thought, even though I didn't articulate it, that maybe there's some way to prove compensation here, but I didn't feel confident enough to put further thought into it in the game. Looks like there is. Queen d3, hitting the knight. I guess the idea there is if knight takes g3, there's queen g6, using the pin, and black's king side collapses. Yeah, take. Everything bearing down on black all of a sudden. Huh. So bishop g5 or bishop d3 is better. Rook e1 looks reasonable, though. Back up the pawn on e4. And h6. I thought d6 would be played here. In which case, yeah, I was contemplating f4. But in a position like this, where I was hoping to use my two bishops and perhaps the prospect of e5 to try to generate counterplay. But I don't know. Even this, I'm not 100% sure on. Let's say rook e8. I think I do have to play pretty actively to justify the damage I'm doing to my structure. But maybe it's there. I know these moves aren't necessarily best according to the engine, but just to show, like if something along these lines, let's say knight d7, probably e6 is good. Yeah, open up lines. Knight g4, probably, yeah, h3. Bishop g5 coming in. Rook b1 to discourage black's light square bishop from coming in. I could see how white gets a decent amount of activity, especially in the short term here. So, yeah, I was expecting d6 or maybe rook e8 in this position. Looks like the engine likes c6 as well. Maybe trying for d5 in some cases. But black plays h6, just rules out bishop g5. Probably not too bad. Yeah, okay, and it's like I suspected, knight b5 was not a good move. That's another move that brings the game close to equality. So, was trying to avoid stuff with bishop takes c3 at this point, but probably I should have just committed to f4 and played this position. And if d6, not e5, but bishop d3. So how might this play out? I'm just kind of curious how the computer wants to handle this. Start developing the pieces. Let's just play some standard move for black. c4. So put the bishop on d3, pawns on c4, e4, f4, and then this bishop, the dark square bishop that is, might come to f6 soon and start bearing down on this long diagonal. Okay, yeah, that could get unpleasant, especially with some sort of queen g3 move maybe mixed in. Black has to be careful here. Okay, yeah, so probably I'm committed to this f4 plan at this point, and I should have gone through with it now that I've got the pawn on e4 very securely defended. But I play knight b5, spending a couple moves to maneuver, try to avoid bishop takes c3. So a6, yeah, c6 is fine here. Because if knight d6 is queen c7 good? Yep, queen c7 is good. And wow, look at this. Knight takes c8, bishop takes h2 is strong for black. It must be this sacrifice. Yeah, so the position I said black may not want to go for, actually the engine says black's significantly better here. Because of knight g4 at the end. Ah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And black's attacking with that queen and knight tandem. Okay, so all hypothetical, but yeah, c6 was good. And I might have to play knight d4 and then rook e8. And I think with this bishop having access to even the c7 square, also the possibility of d5, probably white has to start taking some measures to think about equality at this point. So, okay, black played a6 though. That's very natural. d4, and now d6, that's fine. So what about d5? d5, e takes d5, and if bishop takes h2, nope, the engine doesn't like it. And it's because in this position, yeah, so this is the position I pegged as being potentially dangerous for white because bishop f4 and knight f3 run into queen takes f2. Although the engine actually thinks knight f3 is playable as I control h4. But apparently I can also play queen f3, allow queen h2, so queen f3 to defend f2, but allow queen h2, and even queen h1 flushing the king out isn't going to do much for black. Those checks eventually run out, and white's king is very safe in the center, actually. Okay, so I didn't plan that, but probably would have looked at stuff like that had this occurred. What about king g3? Yeah, king g3 is also good. So that's a reminder, if the Greek gift sacrifice hits the board, especially in a way that you didn't anticipate, consider moving the king to the 3rd or the 6th rank, depending upon which color you're playing. Because that's often a move amateurs don't consider, but it's very often the best way to defend against the Greek gift or perhaps even outright refute it. So do consider it. Looks like here I could play either one. So d5 doesn't work. d6 is fine. I went h3, that's fine. b5. Yeah, knight c6 seemed like a decent idea. I thought black would take with the pawn, but probably what black did is better. So what does it want me to do instead? Bishop d5. Defend the knight. Okay. Knight takes d5, e takes d5. Yeah, this looks temporarily awkward for black. I'm not sure I even want to win a pawn, though. Looking pretty behind in development. Okay, yeah. The engine might be nitpicking there. I think sometimes with the auto analysis, it is a little too quick to assign dubious marks or outright mistakes to moves that are in fact okay. So, I mean, we're talking, at least on this analysis here, a few hundredths of a pawn difference between knight takes e5 and bishop d5. And actually, knight takes e5 is ahead of bishop d5. So I don't know that knight takes e5 deserves a dubious mark. We get the bishop pair. I play bishop b3. So stubbornly, I'm still avoiding bishop d3, which the engine still insists upon. But I thought my pawn was safe enough on e4 because knight takes e4 runs into f3 with the pin. But still, we got to be checking lines. It's important that queen c5 is met by bishop e3. Without bishop e3, I wouldn't be winning a piece here. So bishop e3, yeah, maybe bishop e6 is best for black at this point. That move did cross my mind. I can't remember if I mentioned it, but just offer a bishop trade. And I can't avoid a trade of bishops coming up, can I? Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to play for black. And that's maybe another reason, definitely another reason to play bishop d3 or maybe even bishop f1, which is a retreat you see, especially in e4 openings. When white has played their rook to e1, a lot of times you will see that light square bishop dropping back to f1. Happens in the Ruy Lopez, some lines of the Sicilian. So keep that on your radar too. So bishop b3, black plays bishop b7. This still felt fine for black. f3, ooh, and I see instantly bishop takes e4. Okay, so active learning here, guys. Let's turn off the engine. Why does bishop takes e4 work? Because I thought that just lost a piece to f3 again, using the pin on the 4th rank. So before just having the engine tell us why bishop takes e4 works and why black can refute f3, let's try to figure it out for ourselves. So bishop takes e4, f3, and I'm going to visualize just like this were a situation in the game. I think I see why. Bishop takes f3 for black. So bishop takes e4, f3, bishop takes f3. Not a move I considered at all. If queen takes f3 then, because black is attacking my queen, black has queen takes e1 check, winning that rook. And if g takes f3 instead, black has queen g3 check. And black's going to be picking up h3 with check. My king, if I want to avoid a perpetual, is going to have to go to the center. That looks super dangerous. Yeah. And also bishop takes e4, f3, bishop takes f3, rook takes e5. Trying to play this in-between move game. Still allows bishop takes d1. And I'm going to be losing a pawn there because if bishop takes d1, black takes my rook on e5. D takes e5, and black comes up the exchange. So let's verify now. Bishop takes e4, f3. And this is what you could miss if you weren't thinking critically, even in analysis, because notice how f3 is not in the top couple of moves here. And that's because the engine is probably going to say bishop takes f3 is just very good for black. But in a game between two humans, this is both what we were thinking, I'm sure. Bishop takes e4. Nah, black can't do that because of f3, right? And no other move works for black other than bishop takes f3. Because again, queen c5 check, trying to get out of the pin with tempo, runs into bishop e3. And then white will be clear to pick up the piece. So bishop takes f3, very nice. Yeah. And I even made a visualization mistake here just now in my analysis. I was looking at this line, g takes f3, queen g3, king f1. And I said if white wants to run to the center, yeah, they're going to have to allow some problems. I thought there was still a pawn on e4 and that this might be viable for white. But with rook fe8 in the mix, white fully exposed down the e-file. This is probably losing for white. Bishop e3, queen g2, king d3. Trying to keep things together. C5. Now c5 comes in, threatening c4. Yeah, this looks very rough. A lot of momentum for black and a fully exposed king. And black has 3 pawns for the piece as well, it must be said. Very instructive moment there, guys. And again, I can't stress enough how important it is to actively learn with the engine. If you're just one of these people who loads the game analysis and strictly looks at what the engine says and you don't ever question or think about what the engine is suggesting in the context of what you were thinking about during the game, or the next level, what you think your opponent was thinking about in the game, you're not going to progress too far in chess. I'm sorry to say. That's NPC behavior, to use the term the kids use. Think for yourself. You got to engage this up here, your cognitive muscles. That's all we got as human chess players. We got to make the most of them. We got to exercise them, even in analysis, even when you're just watching a game live. Don't watch it with the engine on all the time. You can do that on occasion, or if you want to see what the evaluation is, but get used to looking at chess, analyzing chess, engaging with chess without the engine, because when you're playing your games, obviously you don't have that, unless you're a cheater, but then you'll get banned real quick. Don't do that. Okay, so c3, yeah, that was a mistake when the bishop lands on b7. So in fact, bishop takes e4 is a threat at this point. And that's why the engine's saying you should play f3, John. in anticipation of that. So I thought I had the luxury of playing f3 on the next move or coming up, but I needed to play it right away because bishop takes e4, f3, bishop takes f3 would have been a nasty surprise. And again, queen takes f3, queen takes e1. And if rook takes e5, bishop takes d1. Important to see this in your head, that white is coming out behind in material if this happens. Down an exchange, plus 2 pawns, actually. Totally losing for white here. Okay, so black didn't pick up on that. They played rook fe8. And this looks harsh, giving rook fe8 a full dubious mark, but it makes sense, especially when bishop takes e5 was so strong for black now, winning a pawn. So I actually really wonder if bishop takes e4, if I would have played f3 or not. If I would have noticed bishop takes f3, I could have easily been lulled into a false sense of security here, because just to expand on this point a second, and thanks to everyone watching this analysis, shout out to the analysis gang. This is where we actually really learn about what was truly going on in the game. So if black had insta-played bishop takes e4, I would have been much more likely to not notice that f3 in reply was a mistake. So I might have just played this and kind of chalked it up to, black clearly is just playing too recklessly here. They didn't see that maybe queen c5 runs into bishop e3 or something. But hopefully, I'd like to think I would have had the discipline to, even if my opponent dished out bishop takes e4, and immediately slow down and say, whoa, wait a second. Even if your opponent plays a move that looks super reckless to you and they play it right away, that doesn't mean 100% guaranteed objectively the move is bad. Okay, so you always got to double check and even triple check if you have the time. So I might have sniffed out f3, bishop takes f3, but I don't know. I was behind on the clock here. The temptation to punish my opponent would have been strong. So had my opponent thought for 2 minutes and then played bishop takes e4, then I would be more skeptical. And maybe at that point, I might have even seen the issue in advance. So just a little further elaboration on that point. Very interesting meta moment. So c3, rook e8. And now I'm definitely playing f3 to defend the pawn. Yeah, interestingly, even though rook fe8, yeah, I think I'm playing f3 now because I don't really see a way I can play the position in a smart way without f3. It's not so much that I'm even thinking about bishop takes e4, f3, bishop takes f3 still. It's becoming hard to play a move that doesn't involve defending the e-pawn again, especially bishop e3, right? I would love to complete coordination, but clearly that is going to drop the pawn. So that was actually the prime motivation to play f3 at this point, because in my head, I might have still thought that taking was still bad. So f3, yeah, knight h5 is actually okay according to the engine. Maybe not the best. But you know what I was a little more worried about was something direct like d5. Is d5 bad? So trying to capitalize on the e-file situation. Okay, I saw f4. I was a little worried about some line like this where black's knight gets into e4. But maybe this is still good for me. Bishop e3. Okay, the knight looks a little annoying, but white is still somewhat better here. This actually reminds me of a main line in the open Ruy Lopez. There's an open Ruy Lopez line where black gets their knight to e4. White has 2 bishops against a bishop and a knight, but super similar. All right. So f3, yeah, just knight h5. I know the engine says that's fine, but I don't know that I like that move. It just seems a little loose to me. So yeah, d5, maybe c5. What does the computer think about c5? Yeah, it says that's okay. c4. You got to be careful creating that backward pawn on d6, but I think that would have been all right. Maybe rook a d8, just a no-nonsense move. Try to centralize. And you look at the black pieces and you're thinking, well, how could black be worse here? But that is the effect of the bishop pair sometimes, guys. So even though my pieces are mostly on the back rank and black has everything in the game and appears to be very well centralized, I'm not shocked that the engine still gives the nod to white. with the two bishops, which can, definitely flex from a distance. But yeah, I just don't like knight h5. It made sense later, but only when black got the rook to e6, which involves sacrificing two pawns. And I don't know that knight h5 was really connected to a deeper plan. Because if black plays knight f4, this is my main hang-up about this move. If you could guarantee the knight stays on f4, that's one thing. But I can play queen d2, create the queen bishop battery against the knight. And these sacrifices aren't going to work anymore for black. I can swing my queen over and defend everything. And I don't think you want to go g5 to prop up the knight. That looks pretty extreme. So yeah, for that reason, I don't like knight h5. I would have tried to stay better centralized, maybe played in the middle somehow. But knight h5, bishop e3, a5, actually the best move. So another move I criticized. The engine says it's right up there. Okay, a5, a4. This seemed nice to me because if pawn takes, I think I could take either way. Bishop takes, hit the rook, or rook takes a4. Although bishop takes a4 gives black an excuse to play this rook e6 move again. Computer's not too concerned, but maybe rook takes a4 would be more practical for that reason. Okay, a4 and then c5. Yeah, so interesting how I didn't connect black's desire to play rook e6 to what black was doing on the queen side in the game. But in hindsight, after black clearly went all in on rook e6, rook g6, and I started analyzing this, it seems so obvious that black was trying to get my bishop off of this a2, g8 diagonal. So a takes b5, a4. Yeah, also good for black. And maybe that makes sense at this point because that's a pretty important pawn that black just lost. I think even the engine is admitting black might want to think about going all in at this point. I mean, rook ed8, maybe, but that's not a human move. So I actually like black's decision to play a4 once they've sacrificed or even blundered the b pawn. Better to be down two pawns, but have, frankly, kind of scary looking attack brewing versus being down one pawn and trying to hang on for dear life and try to defend by normal means. Usually you're going to lose slower that way. So I don't mind what black did. So we get this trade, rook e6. Okay, queen d2, because I can't stop rook g6. So this looks fine. The rook comes over. And I started trying to marshal my forces around my king. Computer's saying queen f2 is okay, but maybe also bishop c2, perhaps lining up with this rook in some cases. Okay, but queen f2 is still +3. Okay, bishop d1, yep. Yeah, I think it'd be very easy to go wrong here for white. Not to toot my own horn, but just on a practical level, I want to stress you can't overreact to a shift in circumstances like this. Black is clearly trying to go on the offensive and grab some counterplay for their two pawns. But you can't self-destruct and get so nervous facing that right away that you're not soberly responding to that shift in momentum. Like, take a deep breath, readjust to what's going on. My framework here is, okay, black's going to throw the kitchen sink at me, but I seem to have played well up till this point. I'm up two pawns. I think I should win if I defend correctly here, but let's not overreact. Let's not play f4 or something, trying to force black's pieces back and allow queen takes e4 and then a complete collapse on g2 with rook takes g2 coming. That's a fast track to losing this game. So bishop d1, that's going to strengthen this f4 operation because not only will it hit the knight on h5 after that, but I think I mentioned also, like if black plays bishop c8, f4, queen takes e4, even with the bishop on b7, I could have bishop f3 here. And getting that bishop to f3 interrupts all of what black was planning. Yeah, even here where I eliminate the knight, and then I can pick up the rook. So sometimes when you go up material, in fact, I would venture to say oftentimes when you go up material, but your opponent's still hanging in there, there will be this period where you have to consolidate and you have to play some defensive moves that look a little scary or maybe even allow some counterplay from your opponent. That's just the price that you pay for spending the time to win that enemy material. That's a normal part of winning a chess game a lot of times. So bishop d1, and then queen f6. Yeah, and this is a little tricky, queen f6, which dodges f4 with tempo. Yeah, and here I mentioned if f4, bishop takes e4. I don't think bishop takes h5 is good. Yeah, because at minimum, what I was mentioning, this operation, although the computer does give the line that I was giving, b6, and that's funny. And yeah, not queen takes e1, queen takes h5. So black can stop the pawn. That's interesting. So yeah, probably good I didn't play f4. So bishop c1 in preparation for f4 in many cases, with the rook helping out to defend the e-pawn. Looks like king h2 is also good. Yeah, I was a little hesitant to put my king here sometimes. I thought maybe there's some universe where black can get rook takes h3 in, but apparently that's fine. Bishop e2, is that to play bishop f1? Yeah, that's to play bishop f1 in response to bishop c8, batten down all the hatches. Wow, I'm over an hour on this video. I'm really trying to analyze these games. This is why even these climbing the rating ladder games go long, but this is the level of analysis that is going to benefit you as a chess player. Just constantly looking at interesting lines that occurred to you in the game after the fact. This active learning we're talking about, using the engine strategically, but also trying to work it out yourself. If you're doing this right, guys, you're going to be spending a lot of times at least as much time playing the game as you do analyzing the game at a time control like this, and more likely more time if it's a 10-minute, 15-minute, something like that game. Okay, so bishop c1. That king h2, bishop e2, bishop f1 thing is ice cold. And I guess I eventually push back black's pieces. But bishop c1. Yeah, so this is the move I was really worried about, bishop c8. Because I was down to a minute 23 at this point. It's still winning for white. But what's the way to play this? Okay, I could play king f1. That might have been what I would have ended up doing, to sidestep bishop takes h3 with the pin. But even this, let's say black plays bishop takes h3, just goes all in. Even rook takes h3, or perhaps queen h4. Yeah, the computer's saying +4, but this looks scary. This looks scary. Like, a lot of stuff can still go wrong here if I'm not careful. I could allow rook h2. The knight could land somewhere inconvenient. Remember, if your opponent has a knight, they have a chance in a chess game. So probably not the situation I truly want to be in a 10+0 game. Maybe 10+5 or something. 30+30 if this were Lone Wolf, I'd feel more comfortable, but still not extremely calm. Yeah, so I think black should have played bishop c8, because given my pawn wedge here, the hopes that black can introduce their light square bishop into the attack are fading, especially now that f4 is on the agenda with the rook helping to defend the pawn on e4. And then that's going to break up the knight defending the rook, that whole construction for black. So I think it was time to try bishop c8. And yeah, even though the engine says black's losing in a couple ways, even f4, bishop takes h3, bishop f3 apparently. I think black has to go for this. How does bishop takes h3, bishop takes h5 work? Because I would have thought this is similar, but is it... Oh, look at this difference. Here, I'll turn the engine off again. Rook takes g2, queen takes g2, bishop takes g2, king takes g2, queen h4. Remember I mentioned a very similar line? In a different variation, forking the rook and the bishop. I think there might be two things wrong with this for black. One, and this is the simplest, I actually didn't see this right away. Rook h1 is possible, defending the bishop on h5. I think in those other lines I had a pawn on h3 still. So rook h1 wouldn't make as much sense. But here we're defending through the black queen and holding the bishop. And two, this is maybe the fancier thing. I actually wonder if now we can play b6. Maybe not. But I was thinking if queen takes d5, b7, there's no queen d5 check anymore. But maybe the issue is queen takes e1. Yeah, if b7, queen takes e4 check, forks the king in the pawn. There's still bishop f3. This might be too much, though. Oh, no. This allows promotion. Queen e8. Queen e8 is equal somehow with the bishop supporting the pawn. I guess b4 is coming in maybe. Somehow that's equal. Yeah, okay, so probably rook h1. Yeah, rook h1 is the way to go here. If b6, queen takes h5 actually is the way to punish this. Oh, why is that? Because of b7. Turn this off again. Try not to look. b7. Queen g4, and then some series of checks. Black can get over to d8. Must be. Not queen g6, though. Because queen g6, king f1, and black has no more good checks, and they can't stop the pawn. So yeah, queen g4. And if king f2, check. Even if white tries to stay close to the rook, queen d8, and then there's no light square bishop supporting that pawn. That pawn's a goner. Interesting to compare lines like that, build those connections. But yeah, rook h1, key difference compared to a similar line. So that's more complicated on bishop c8. If I had played f4, I think I probably would have played king f1, I believe. That looks most rational to me to sidestep the brunt of bishop takes h3, although black might still want to try that. But even, yeah, I mean, bishop takes h3, queen h4, this still would have been tricky. Like f4 now is losing or gives up a lot of the advantage. Because if something like this happens, black has rook g2 in the end. So this is the construction I was worried about. Knight on h5, queen on h4, rook on g3, bishop on c8, and some brute force breakthrough with bishop takes h3 coming in somewhere. So apparently still winning for white, b6 even. So I always have b7 up my sleeve if black gets over their skis. But with this time, that would have been scary for sure. But in the game, black was probably trying to play off my clock too much because their position went downhill rapidly. Queen h4, f4, and now bishop takes h5 is on deck. Yeah, maybe there's just no good option at this point. I guess black can play knight f6, but rook e3, yeah. Although knight takes e4? Is it the same thing? We can take... No, not this, because rook takes g2. Okay, I would not have seen bishop c2. The idea. Knight takes e4. Or knight takes f2. d8, checkmate. Okay, I'm not seeing that. So actually, knight f6 might have been a good try for black. I probably would have played bishop f3. But even that move, bishop f3, allows queen takes h3. So knight f6 would have set up queen takes h3 and knight takes e4. If I have to refute this with rook e3, knight takes e4, bishop c2, or bishop c2 right away, queen takes h3, rook e3. Yeah, I mean, that's a precise sequence. Trying to trade. Because if takes, I can take the queen now. That would have been challenging still. So knight f6. And if you saw some of these lines I was going over, if you saw those during the game, kudos to you, because yeah, there's ways black can still keep this complicated. Maybe f5 isn't a bad try, but knight f6 actually would have been probably trickier, I think. So f5, trying to gouge open this diagonal. E takes f5, rook takes g2. But I went for this. And this was still, a bit hard to apprehend in the moment. Rook takes e4. Looks like that is the best move. Yeah, and important too. Without that resource, I have trouble. Because rook takes g2 is on deck. And bishop f3 just allows bishop takes f3. And the pin persists. So, yeah, I didn't calculate all this from a few moves back, but I had a feeling it would work out. And I think given my time situation, that's forgivable. Hard to calculate all this in the moment. Bishop f7 is also good. It's funny. And this is because here, black is again sort of frozen with their queen and their rook, and I can actually play that b pawn forward. I was wondering if the b pawn coming forward might matter in some case. But rook takes e4 looks way simpler. I like bishop e3. It's probably not the only move. Probably a lot of stuff wins here. Yeah, probably even b6 wins. Yeah, it does. But bishop e3 seemed nice and sturdy. Just anticipating any looseness with that bishop in some lines, because the whole point is black is pinned. Their rook is pinned to their queen. So let's just secure our position a little more. I've got 2 pieces for the rook, and I also importantly have this b pawn, which is going to run at some point. So yeah, black's busted here. Played rook takes e3, but I think it scarcely matters at this point. Queen takes h5, queen takes g3. There's no hope for a perpetual or anything. So yeah, rook takes e3, queen takes h4. All right, so this wasn't the longest game, only 31 moves, but I think that was a good discussion around the center fork trick. Hope you guys understand that a bit better and why it's a theme you have to look for, particularly in e4, e5 openings. It almost always happens out of e4, e5, or I shouldn't say it almost always happens. It happens a lot out of e4, e5 openings, but it could happen in stuff like the Bodler attack of the Sicilian as well. I guess I can show that real quick. So, you know, players who played bishop c4 against the Sicilian, let's just say a line like this. Knight c3. So here too, you can see the engine saying knight takes e4, knight takes e4, d5. Because even if it doesn't win material, which it usually doesn't, it's just a good way to break up the enemy center and wind up with a situation where you might have more of a central pawn presence than they do. Their central pawn presence might be completely wiped out, actually. So it does happen in other openings. It's largely an e4 phenomenon, but do keep an eye on it in all sorts of openings. So when you got minor pieces out there on adjacent ranks, it can happen. And remember, 2 minor pieces on the same rank with 1 square in between are always subject to a pawn fork. So you better embed that pattern in your head. 2 pawns on the same rank with 1 square in between. In this case, that's the d5 square in between. They're subject to a pawn fork. So good discussion of the center fork trick. Some theory here. I'll try to remember bishop d3. Still seems passive to me, but defending that e4 pawn makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I think later on, some good discussion of defense, kind of the respective plans. Black played this phase of the game pretty well. Nice illustration of overlooking an idea here with bishop takes e4, f3 being refuted by bishop takes f3. And I'll just remind you once more, use the engine as a way to enhance your own understanding. Don't just be a slave to the engine's, whatever the engine's spitting out. You know, always try to engage with it actively. Yeah, and this is good. This is a very human way of playing what black did after they lost that pawn on b5. So I think this was instructive because, to my opponent's credit, they did whip up some scary looking play. And maybe this could have gone differently had black tweaked things just a little bit and I used just a little too much time in defense. But I'll remind you, don't be afraid to play some consolidating moves in defense and expect that you might have to consolidate, coordinate your position after you've won some material in order to eventually win the game. And you also have to be willing to calculate and diffuse some stuff that your opponent's going to throw at you. Okay, so thanks to Clamp7377 for the game. Hope you guys picked some stuff up on this one. Thanks again if you watched the analysis all the way through. This was a long one, but I think instructive. And let me know if you have any questions. And I'll see you guys again soon. All right, bye guys.